Okay.
Hi, my name is Rick Carpenter. My friends call me Rick Carpenter. Okay, we are going to talk about macro photography, which we were going to do back in August. But I decided I'd rather get COVID and, spend 2 weeks in the hospital. That was a lot of fun. Bed and breakfast. You know what's really funny? The food is actually pretty impressive for a hospital. Not that I wanted to stay there.
It was impressive, the hospital's food.
It was pretty good.
Really?
It was actually pretty good.
Of course, you had no sense of taste or smell at that
Yeah.
point.
No, I lost that later. Well, I'm a guy. I don't have any sense of taste anyway. But sorry. Okay.
Ask to refresh.
Okay.
So, a lot to cover tonight. The first thing I want to do is talk about what macro is. Okay, macro lenses, macro photography. How many of you actually have a macro lens?
What is
I have one that says
Tell us what it
macro on
is.
it. but
Okay.
Does
I
it say
think
macro
you
on
know
it?
how works.
Okay,
Okay.
and that's a good question. I'm going to talk about that. What is a macro lens? Okay, well, most of the time when we talk about macro, we are talking about close focusing. Okay? We want to be able to focus really close. We want to be able to see the whiskers on that bug. Okay? We want to be able to see those snowflakes or whatever. Okay? That's what we call macro photography. It's close-up photography. Okay? Macro lenses are special. They are actually very different. So now, the one thing about normally when we think of macro lenses, we think of close focusing. Like this one is called a micro Nikkor. It's a macro lens. And what makes it close focus is it can roll the lens elements out a long way. Okay? And when I roll it all the way out, I can get half life size with this lens. This will go to half life size. Okay? Now, the physics of the way lenses work is when you have a lens that is focused at infinity, like if you have a 50 millimeter lens and you focus it at infinity, that means that center part of the lens elements, what we call the focal point there, is 50 millimeters away from your camera sensor. Okay? A 50 millimeter lens focused at infinity, the center elements of that lens are 50 millimeters away from your camera sensor, film plane, whatever you want to, back in my day it was film plane, okay? When you push those lens elements out, like if I do this again, okay, now this is a 55 millimeter macro lens. If I move this and the lens elements are now moving further away, it focuses closer, okay? Now, this 55 millimeter lens will extend out 27.5 millimeters. That's how much this is compared to that. It moves out 27.5 millimeters. By moving out half of its focal length, I get a half life size picture. If this lens were to go out 55 millimeters, okay, in other words, a 55 millimeter lens focused at infinity, if I can roll those lens elements out 55 more millimeters, I have a life-size 1-to-1 ratio picture. What the sensor picks up is exactly the same size, its actual size, okay? So like if I had a 200 millimeter lens, and I was able to move that lens 200 millimeters more away, it's going to give me a life-size image, okay? Now, macro lenses are actually a little different from just close focusing. A normal lens has what we call a curved field. Can you all see that okay? Okay? So, for example, if I'm pointing at this wall and pretend I'm 10 feet away, okay? And I focus at 10 feet away, and if I go over here, that part of the wall is not 10 feet away from me. It's probably 11 or 12 feet. It's going to be out of focus. That's because the lens has a curved field. So if I turn that way, 10 feet away is going to be somewhere out here in the floor space. Does everybody understand that? Okay? A true macro lens is different. A true macro lens has a flat field. Okay? particularly at close focus distances. What happens is now, if I have a macro lens and I point it here, that wall is all going to be in focus. It's a flat field lens. It's cut, the lens elements are cut differently so that I have a flat focusing field. That is important because macro lenses are very often used for copy stand work, reproduction of artwork or flat work as we call it. And you can't have a curved field because that means that the corners of my flat work or my copy work are going to be out of focus. And so they have to have a flat field lens to take a picture of flat subjects. That doesn't, we don't care when we're shooting nature, flowers, bugs, whatever. We don't need flat field. So a true macro lens isn't really what we're after. What we are after is close focusing, right? We just want to get nice and close, okay? The longer your lens, you know, instead of a 55, if you have a 100 millimeter lens or a 200, whatever, the longer your lens, the further away from your subject you can be and have the same magnification. Because, you know, if I want to get right down there in the face of that bug, he's going to fly away, maybe, right? Or if I'm trying to photograph a snake, I want to get really close.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Rattlers.
Yes. That cobra hood, that's really cool. Let me get really close and get the detail on that. Ouch. Okay? Suddenly COVID's not a big problem. Okay? So you can, the longer your lens to close focus with, the further away from your subject you can be. But then we run into problems because longer lenses have more problems with things like camera shake. Okay, you ever notice that? Okay, so, and that's why our longer lenses, we have image stabilization or vibration reduction. We have these new systems to stabilize our image so that when we handhold, you know, photographing birds or whatever, you know, we're not creating a dizzy blur, okay? Because a lot of the lenses we use handheld today with vibration reduction and image stabilization had to be tripod mount in the past. You couldn't do that without a tripod. It just wasn't possible. Okay? But that's the challenge. Now, there are several things about technique that I wanted to go over also. Okay? Ways to focus. Okay? Now, one thing I'm going to do, for example, is I'm going to put this zoom lens on here. And just to show, as an example, okay, when you're doing close focus photography, sometimes, because when you get like really close, your depth of field, if you know what depth of field is, it's how much from front to back is actually in focus. It's very, very, very thin. The closer you are to your subject, the shorter your depth of field is. And it can get down to literally millimeters when you are really, really close to a subject. Okay? And so if I'm going to pretend that this is a close focusing lens, which it isn't, but for the sake of it, okay? With a zoom lens, it's actually easier to focus using your zoom ring when you're really, really close, okay? Than to focus here, because the zoom, your camera will change the focal length, and it will completely mess up your focus. You can focus with the zoom ring sometimes a lot easier than with the focus ring when you're really close to a subject. Okay. The other thing I wanted to point out, though, too, that I do personally is I'll get my focus and my zoom into where I have an approximate focus point. But the thing is that when you're, especially if you're hand holding, if you're not on a tripod, movement is critical, because remember, if my depth of field is just a matter of millimeters, any movement at all and I'm out of focus easily, right? It's actually easier for me to brace myself, and I've taught a class before about how to brace with your body, okay? I don't know, some of you were there, okay, where it's actually, if you're going to handhold It's easier to put all your weight in your support hand, your non-shooting, your non-trigger hand, put all the weight on that and use this just for a little bit of stabilization, okay? Put this arm up against your body. For you ladies, you may need to put it over here on the side, okay? Sorry, some of you have headlights, you need to go to the side, okay? All right, pardon me, but you know, it's a real issue, okay? So I'm gonna do this, and now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move back and forth with my body like this. Instead of trying to focus with this, I'm just gonna get it approximately where I want it, and then I'm gonna move slightly back and forth with my body like that until I get my focus. I might need to take several, okay? The other thing is too, if you are fortunate enough to get an autofocus zoom lens or autofocus macro lens or autofocus close-up lens, you can use the autofocus to do that, okay? If you're going to do it, you need to set your focus point to a single, like a spot, okay? And don't try to do the, you know, where it's trying to catch everything, because once again, you're really close, your depth of field is super shallow, and if you're trying to photograph a flower and you want to photograph the pistils of the flower, that may not be what your camera picks up if you have a wider field, you know, sensor array. So you want to pick spot method, focus on the one thing you want to be in focus, stay on that, and you know, and then move just back and forth instead of trying to focus. Just move back and forth till you get what you want. Use your autofocus. I don't use autofocus for that. I use manual focus. It's just my method. Okay? Did I have a hand?
No.
Okay. All right. Now, let's talk about stabilization. Okay? Now, I love my monopod. I recommend everybody get one if you don't have one. Okay? But I'm going to show you something else that you can do with a monopod. If you're going to do macro photography, you know how I mentioned about being able to move your body back and forth? Okay? You still have to hold it steady. Okay? And I find that if I use a monopod, and now, if I'm going to rock back and forth slightly, I'm a whole lot more stable having it on a monopod. Everybody understand that? Okay? Okay, I can move back and forth ever so slightly, just millimeters at a time until I get what I want. Okay? You can use your tripod. Okay? I brought my tripod. I'm going to demonstrate that later, but you can use your tripod. And that is a situation too where it's really great to try, you know, use your zoom ring, you know, get it close and then use your zoom ring to finalize your focus. Okay? We talked about image stabilization, vibration reduction for Nikon people, OS for Sigma. Everybody's got their OOP, I think, for Sony. I don't know what they call it for Fuji, but anyway, that's great. Now, the other thing I want to point out, though, too, one of the things that you can do to stabilize your image is use a flash. Okay? Now, the problem with a flash with macro photography, if you use the flash that's on your camera, and I'm looking at something that's this far away, what problem am I going to have?
You're gonna wash it out,
Okay.
you're not gonna even see it.
No, that actually isn't the problem. I'm hearing that from everybody.
Isn't it?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, because the front of the lens, the top here, is going to block the light from the flash from hitting my subject, and I'm going to have a big dark spot. Okay? The reason why it won't blow it out or overlight it is because if I'm using what's called TTL flash, you all know, you've seen it in K. TTL stands for through the lens. There's a sensor inside the camera that measures the amount of light that hits the sensor. It works for your auto exposure method when you're shooting daylight, but it also works for flash. What happens is this flash is regulated by that TTL sensor. When the camera determines that enough light from the flash has already hit the subject, it'll shut the flash off. That all happens in about 5/100th of a second. Too fast for you to even know it. Okay, but the through the lens TTL flash method regulates the amount of flash. It might go full blast, it might go at a 1/16 of its full power. It depends. So being too close or being really close is not a problem. Your flash is going to adjust automatically. Okay? The problem is if you use this flash, you might have a problem. So the answer to that is to have a separate flash. Okay? Now if I put this up here, I'm up above what's going to shadow my subject. Okay? See that? Or I can also do this if I really want to. I have a bracket to hold an external flash. I can put my, and this is a TTL cable that I can now put on top of my camera like that. And then I can put the flash over here like this. And this bracket was only like $18. I mean, they're not horribly expensive. Okay. So now, and what I like about this though, is not just that I'm off the camera and I can get nice and close, but I now have something that's like portrait lighting. Okay. My flash isn't directly above the subject. Okay. Which is going to make it, the lighting look a little flatter. Or like the ring lights, you all seen ring lights. I don't like those because they make the subject look extremely flat, two-dimensional, no shadows, no texture. You know, I don't like the effect. It's great for medical photography. It's great for industrial photography. It is not good for nature if you're going to try to show any depth, any three-dimension quality to your subject. Okay, having it off to the side gives it depth. It's, you know, like portrait lighting. How, you know, one side of the face is lighter than the other. This will accomplish that. This cable maintains my through the lens meter capability because it's got the right pins here and here. I think I paid $22 for this cable or something like that. No big deal. Okay. So the reason why flash is good for stabilization is because the flash duration is 250th to 500th of a second. Okay? It almost doesn't matter how much you're shaking. Normally if you handheld, it's going to be blurry because you just can't, that's why we have tripods. A flash alleviates almost all of that problem. Okay? And for some subjects where you, it's low light, maybe it's late in the day, or maybe just because of the equipment you have, or you're working in a shadowed area, you just need more light than what is available. Flash solves the problem.
So
Okay?
what kind of ISO do you use when you use a flash
I usually shoot at 200 to 400.
with a flash? Okay.
Okay? Now, our cameras are all so good at this point. The ISO really only becomes a problem if you're going to crop a lot. Okay? Now, depending on how tiny your subject is, if you're trying to shoot snowflakes, you're probably going to be cropping quite a lot to get down to that little tiny thing. And so using a flash with a low ISO like 200 might be important. If I'm not trying to crop that much, I was doing test shots one night at ISO 3200, and they looked great because they didn't have to crop any. Okay? I can get a one-to-one life-size shot of something at ISO 3200 and you'll never know that it was that high. Okay? Cropping is where ISO becomes an issue. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So this is another way to stabilize your images. Flash, it's a wonderful addition, but you need to have an external. If you want to mount it up there, that's great. If you want to buy a side bracket, I've got a couple of different side brackets. You know, this one I can, you know, bend to shape, and I can actually put two flashes on if I wanted to. You know, for true portrait lighting. You know, I've got a little bug who's a real poser. I may want to just have a little portrait session. Okay. Okay, so that's another method. Now, let's talk about focusing aids. Anybody else have any other questions so far? I'm going kind of fast and I'm throwing a lot of information. Okay? Don't be shy. Ask questions if you have them.
So would you get a better image with a macro lens than you would a long lens like that?
No. That shouldn't make any difference at all.
No more excuses?
Well, but the thing is, okay, keep in mind that most macro lenses are shorter, like mine's a 55 millimeter. I had a 105 millimeter before I sold it because I never use them. You know, the reason I have this lens, I bought this specifically to teach this class. And I use it as my normal lens now, okay? When I go, some people know that I have a mixture of manual focus and autofocus. I like manual focus lenses better for the short, the wide angle stuff. But I have to use autofocus with VR for longer, especially if I'm going to try to capture wildlife, okay? But for the short stuff, I still like manual focus lenses a lot, okay? And the Nikon cameras can take the old manual focus lenses from the 60s and 70s. I mean, I have a 50 millimeter lens from 1964 that works perfectly. It's beautiful. And, you know, this lens here is from about 1973. This is a 49-year-old lens that's perfect. And the other thing I like about the old Nikon manual focus professional lenses, I'm not going to do it, but I could slam this on the floor and pick it up and it'd still work great.
Where are you getting your older lenses at?
eBay. I'm an eBay freak.
Yeah.
How do you know that
Thank you.
you're gonna get something that's decent?
Well, I
Something's
trust
not
their
gonna
descriptions. I've returned plenty.
Have you?
Oh yeah, because if it doesn't meet the description, you have return rights. So I have no worries. I've only ever been ripped off one time. It was because I bought a lens from Russia. And it's a little tough to return that one, you know? So I just ate that one. But other than that, I've had to return a few, but generally I've had pretty good luck. Okay? So something else, I want to show you some other things that are possible for you. Now the other thing too, some of you love to do wildlife. Lori's been killing it with wildlife photography, but she also has spent money to be able to do that.
I did what?
You've spent money.
Oh.
She spent some chili to have the equipment to be able to do that, and that's fine. If wildlife is what you love, you spend the money to get the equipment that help you do what you love. If macro is what you love, you know, for example, for Nikon, they have a macro lens now that has vibration reduction. It's a 105 millimeter lens with VR, so it image stabilizes. That's the first macro lens that I know of that has that capability. That's pretty amazing. Okay, so you know, the whole handheld issue, it helps a lot. Okay,
So it's
105 millimeter.
does it say macro on it?
Micro Nikkor is what they call it. It's Nikon uses the word micro. It's called a micro Nikkor, 105 millimeter f2.8 VR. It's a $500 lens or something like that. Okay, you can buy them used for $450, whatever. But if you do a lot of macro, if that's your thing, buy the lens because you're going to use it a lot. Okay, but I'm going to show you some alternatives here in a little bit of other alternatives. Okay, this is what we call a focusing rail, okay? And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn it this way so it's easier, okay? But suppose now I've got my macro lens, and I'm going to mount my camera on there, okay? And I'm going to point it down here at Evelyn, and I'm going to pick out every freckle and every little thing. No, okay, I can't see, okay. But this is what's cool about this. If you mount on a tripod and you need to micro focus, I mean, if you're really getting down to the nitty gritty of something, this has some controls over here on the side, okay. For example, I can loosen, if I loosen this and this, I can just twist and it'll roll back and forth. See that? Okay.
What is that called?
It's a focusing rail.
Rail?
Okay?
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's the same thing like what you were doing when you were holding still and leaning forward.
Yeah, except that this is just more precise. Okay?
Yeah.
And when I get it to where I want it, then I can tighten it with this little button over here, this little knob. Now it's tight, it's not going to move. Okay? I want to focus a little closer, a little further back. Focusing rail is pretty cool.
Do you
Okay.
have it to the cross?
I don't. That's called doing this.
Well, but that sends you at an angle.
Yes, it
versus-
does. No, I don't have that ultra sophisticated three-dimensional version. Okay, that will go laterally as well as forward and back, you're right. But they do have those, it just, you know, how much money do you want to spend? Okay, so this is a tool that's available to help you focus. This works great if you have the time to set your tripod, put that on there, put the camera on, and work it. Okay, it's a great little tool to have. If
So, can I ask,
sure,
why couldn't you use that in birds? Doing birds?
For birds?
Still.
it would be a complete waste because you don't need
can't go
to.
back and forth?
You don't need to micro focus.
Well, you're not, but is that basically just for micro focus?
Yes.
Is it a
That's all.
stuffed bird?
It has no. What's that?
Is it a stuffed bird?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way,
See, you're better. I was gonna say, is it a dead bird?
I almost said that.
She's gone to the. She's already been to the taxidermist. Okay. Yours is dead. Yours is on the shelf. Okay.
It's just frozen.
Yeah. Yeah. There we go. Okay.
The dead bird.
So the focusing rail is one method to be able to fine tune your focusing. Okay. And they can be very, very effective. So let me talk about magnification aids, okay? So we've talked about how macro lenses or close focusing lenses have a lot of movement outward to push the lens elements away from the camera, because the further away from the camera your lens elements go, the closer you can focus, okay? So let's talk about things that you can do. Now, there are a couple of simple things. First of all, I'm going to share with you what are called close-up lenses. They come in typically a set of 3. I don't know why there's no number 3, but typically you have a number 1 and a number 2 and a number 4. Okay?
And they're called what?
Close-up lens.
Close-up lens.
It's basically a filter that has just a lot of magnification. Okay? So I can put 1 or all on there. Okay? And number 1 has the least amount of magnification, and number 2 is next, and number 4 has the most. And you can put them all on together at the same time.
And they work together to,
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what I want to do is, let's take your water bottle. Okay, I want you to go ahead and take a look through there. You can focus and do whatever you want, but I want you to focus on something on your water bottle and see just how close that lets you get.
Does it maintain the clarity?
Do you have back button or regular?
It's not an autofocus lens, so it
Oh,
won't
well,
matter.
there you go. That's,
Okay, you may have to get a lot closer than that. Okay, let's find your spot.
okay,
But can you see how much that's magnifying?
yes,
It's pretty incredible, isn't it?
yes.
Okay.
do it, but
Okay, she's getting, it's magnifying tremendously. And you can buy a set of these for about $10.
Really?
Is this similar to, I used to have extension tubes that went on the back of my lens.
We're going to talk about those separately. Okay?
So it's not the
Okay.
same thing.
So
No.
on these, like to some lenses, you always, lens quality is really important. So with
Okay.
those, what is the situation with that?
Quality wise?
Yeah, I mean, is it like,
What's the reproduction
Is it-
ratio?
is it soft, really soft on the edges? Because it seemed like it was on that, but that might not have been
Well,
true. I mean,
partly you're looking at an extremely curved subject.
that's true,
Okay.
yes,
Okay?
yeah.
So now try that again. Stand up and look straight down on your paper. Okay? Look straight down on the paper and tell me what you see there. And again, you're looking at the lens in its wide open aperture. If you stopped it down to f11 or something, it's going to be a little different.
Yeah, it is, it's nice and clear.
Okay. Yeah. So you can get a set of the, I think I paid $9 for this particular set
How long ago?
last year.
Okay.
Okay.
On eBay again?
How'd you guess? Yes.
Because they're $50 online.
Okay. And so now, the other thing is extension tubes. Okay. Now, the one thing I want to point out about the macro lens is it has the internals to be able to roll the lens elements out. Not all lenses can do it. Not all lenses can do it far enough. So we have what are called extension tubes. It simply is a tube that goes between the lens and the camera. And now I'm extended out. And now if I roll this out here, because now these two tubes together, 25 and 20, these are 50 millimeter tubes. So this plus, I am more than life size. I'm going to have about a 1.2 to 1, 1.3 to 1, a bigger than life size image now. So try that again. Focus on your bottle. Don't worry about what's in focus or not. You're going to have to get really close on that one. Okay? But see how
Yeah.
incredible the magnification is? That's bigger than life size.
I liked using mine with my 70 to 200
Yeah,
with the extension tubes
yeah,
for flowers.
yes.
So that
Okay.
was nice.
And the other thing too that I want to point out is these extension tubes, yours probably do too, these are autofocus. These have the pins
Yes.
to
and then-
maintain autofocus and image stabilization together. Okay?
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, and I was going to mention, because I know you have that 70 to 200, you put these on that, you can get pretty close. At
Yeah.
200 millimeters, you've got a really great close-up image there. Okay? And with a 24 megapixel camera, you can crop a ton to get down to the little tiny part of that frame that you really want.
Right.
Okay? So, extension tubes are great. You can also get a bellows if you want to mount this to the tripod as well. A bellows is,
Oh my word, I've never seen that before.
oh yeah, I've had a few of these in the past. And again, great for really close-up work. When I used to have a commercial photography studio in Arizona many years ago, and I used to do a lot of semiconductor photography, really tiny little stuff, and I used a bellows.
So that's like a variable length
Yes.
extension tube.
Yes, exactly what it is, okay? So for example, I could put this on like that, put my lens on there. Now this is all purely manual focus stuff.
How do you spell that? Bellows?
B-E-L-L-O-W-S.
Bellows.
Bellows. Bellows.
Because it looks like a
Oh,
bellow.
okay, that makes
Okay.
He's an
sense.
import.
Sorry. Yeah, I bought mine in Eureka next to the Taco Bell in Wab County. Okay, all right. So yeah, now that I have the bellows, okay, it is basically a variable extension tube. See this?
58 millimeter bellows.
Okay? Pretty cool, right? You know, if I rack it out all the way with a 55 millimeter lens, I'm getting the eyelashes on a fly. Okay?
Nice.
Okay?
I've seen
Okay.
one of those.
So
Neither
yeah.
have I.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
this is surreal.
Okay. So yeah, there are all kinds of options. Now, check this out. This is going to totally fascinate you. I promise. Okay?
What's that writing? How many toys do you
I'm
have in
setting the standards high here.
How many toys do you have in your bag?
No, he's got a lot of toys.
Well,
Okay.
if you've been a photographer, it's like a magician's bag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Voila. Eeny, meeny, chili, beany.
Bottomless bag of camera
Okay.
accessories.
This is what is called a reversing ring. Reversing ring.
Oh,
Okay? I put this on my camera.
Reversing.
It's a
And then you can
reversing
turn
ring,
your
okay?
lens on backwards,
Yes.
and then you can take
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to take a standard 50 millimeter manual focus lens. Okay, you see this is the mount side right there. This is the thread side. I'm going to mount this to the camera backwards. Watch this.
Why
Okay?
would you want to do that?
Because it creates tremendous magnification. Because when you put a lens on backwards, it magnifies tremendously.
I didn't even know
Okay.
you do that.
Yeah, well, this is back from the film era. Okay? So now, okay, Chris, let's do, let's,
YouTube,
okay,
tell me these
take a
things.
look, pick something out, you know, your pen, your bottle,
No, that's true. They're
whatever.
not-
Okay, yeah. Look at the barcode or look at your QR code. There, that's up. Okay, now, go ahead and take a look through that. You're gonna have to get pretty close, but look how much magnification you have. It's about a 1-to-1
Yeah.
magnification just by turning the lens backwards.
what size lens is it?
That's a 50. Standard, normal 50 millimeter prime lens. Okay?
Wow.
Now what's really cool, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
how close you can get. You probably had the entire QR code
So
filling the
why
whole
would
frame.
why would you
Yeah.
wanna
Oh, yeah.
turn it backwards?
Okay. Number one reason why is because you can get incredibly close. Okay, you don't need extension tubes. You don't need a bellows. I mean, those are all great tools if you want. But my reversing ring is the size of a filter. Takes up, it's no weight, no space. You just have to have manual focus lenses typically to do it. But the nice thing about this, you can go buy the cheapest, crappiest old lens and do this, and your pictures will be amazingly sharp, even with a crappy lens.
The Canon 18 to 55 works pretty well.
What that?
The Canon 18 to 55 kit lens works pretty well.
On a reversing ring?
Yeah.
I've never, okay.
I found at least with that one, it's better to get the old one that doesn't have the image stabilization.
Okay, well, here's the problem. Well, it wouldn't matter because once you...
No, it's just the focus works better.
Yeah, okay. The thing is that most autofocus lenses these days, when you take them off the camera, they're down to their tightest, smallest aperture. Okay, especially Nikons. You need to be able to open that thing up so you can see, and that's why manual focus lenses just work better for this. And it doesn't matter. Go buy a Sears or a JCPenney 50mm lens. It doesn't matter. Spend $10 on the crap lens. It's okay because once you do this, your image quality is going to be outstanding. Okay? Reversing ring. Okay? Let's have some more fun. Okay? So, where it is? Here it is. Okay. This is a 135mm telephoto lens. Okay? This is a face-to-face ring. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to put this on this telephoto lens,
Face to face?
face-to-face, and I'm going to take my 50 and I'm going to put it face-to-face on this other lens, like this.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay?
Huh?
Now, here's the math. Here's the math about doing this.
So
Okay?
what are the lenses?
This is a 135 and a 50.
Okay.
Okay. The math. What is 135 divided by 50? It's going to be about 2.8, right? Guess what? 135 divided by 50. This is now magnifying 2.8 times life size. Okay? Try that out now. Okay? Just, try to focus on that QR code. You have to get pretty close. You're just going to have to require a lot of stabilization there.
No kidding.
Okay? Okay?
Holy moly.
You can't even get the whole QR code in that
Wow,
image.
No,
Okay?
Wow.
Come up to the top where it says Top Flight right up here. Come up to this part. And that little logo next to Top Flight, or the word top or the word flight, how much of that are you getting in there?
Oh, part of flight.
Part
I
of
can-
flight.
Yes,
Okay?
most of it, but not quite all of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's about that long. She can't even get it all in. That's how much this is magnifying almost 3 times life size by doing this.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
I'm just taking a step back to the reversing
It's a
ring.
face-to-face ring.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
That's when you need
Crazy, isn't it?
almost a tripod thing to
Okay, check
stabilize.
that out. Focus like on something on your bottle. You have to get really close though.
Oh, this writing right there. It'll be that
I
tiny.
know, but moving up while you're.
Oh!
Whoa!
You see it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
on the
okay.
reversing ring,
Yes.
you were saying manual focus,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
So
I would make
can
it
you,
like that.
you know how you can focus lock on some lenses? You can lock the focus.
Yeah.
Will that and then,
Okay, well, first of all,
Disabling it,
remember
will
your
that work,
lens,
do you know?
you're using a manual focus lens.
well, no, I mean, because I'm thinking of what I have.
Right.
So I don't have manual, I mean,
You have
there-
just
we
autofocus
have,
though.
I have a 50 that I can turn to manual focus. Is
Okay?
that gonna be the same thing, or is that not the same?
It depends on what kind of lens it is. If it is the older, the Nikon older, the D type lens that has If it's the kind of lens that has an aperture ring on the bottom, then
Okay.
yes, you can. But if it is the newer kind, the G lenses that don't have an aperture ring, you cannot.
Okay,
Okay? You
Okay,
understand what I
so-
mean?
I do.
Okay. Question.
Because you use the
Okay.
well, you use the aperture to focus.
Well, no, you don't have to,
on-
but
well,
the
I'm
thing is
thinking
that
on some of this
on
stuff.
the G-type autofocus Nikon lenses, it always is at its tightest, smallest aperture until you hook it to a camera and it. So if I reversed a autofocus lens, like a G-type lens, I'm not going to see anything. It's just, like nighttime. It's going to be f/22 opening, and I just can't see there.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, see that? I have two lenses that are face to face with each other.
And that-
Incredible, and the ratio is this lens divided by this lens is your magnification rate.
So you had a face-to-face, a reversal, and what was the other one?
Okay, well, I had a bellows, I had close-up lenses, which they call them lenses, but they're actually like little filters.
Close-up filters?
Yeah, okay, these things. They look like filters, but they're called close-up lenses, okay? Face-to-face ring,
So that
or
goes
thread-to-thread.
your lens, then the face-to-face, and then your other lens.
Yeah, see?
Backwards. The last
The
one's
reversing.
backwards,
Right, see,
Reversing.
if I take this lens off, okay, then I have a thread adapter that has the thread diameter of both lenses, and I can get, different thread sizes if I wanted. If I wanted to, these are both 52 millimeter standard Nikon thread, but if I had a 62 millimeter lens here and a 52 here, I could get a ring that would do that, okay? Reversing ring is just one that fits your camera lens mount and then whatever thread size you want to put the lens on. They make them in all thread sizes. Okay?
So just by experience with that, once I get it on the lens, it's almost impossible to get off. I have a rubber band.
Oh, okay.
I
Well,
don't know if it's just my lens, I don't know.
is that a reversing ring or what? Oh. Can I see that? Yeah, that's what that is. Okay. So it's really hard to get it off the camera or off the lens. You might be tightening your lens down on this too tight.
When I put it on the camera, it tightens it down onto the
That's right.
lens.
Put this on the camera first, then put the lens on this. That will, because I understand what you, if you have this on and then you put
But I
the,
always forget.
yeah, put this on the camera first and then put the lens on this and you won't have that problem. Okay?
Thanks for not throwing.
Or the other way, unscrew the lens from the ring first and then remove the ring. And that way it's not so tough. Okay? Because I totally get what you're saying. Any questions? I'm throwing some crazy stuff at you here, but these are all very legitimate macro methods. Okay? Now, when you use the face-to-face ring and your magnification is sick, like 2 to 1, 3 to 1, it's harder to photograph. Because you're now, your depth of field is a couple of millimeters maybe. You're going to have to be very, very precise. Don't drink caffeine before you go out to shoot. Okay? Or you're done. Because you're going to,
How do you get light in there? I
okay?
mean, that's like,
That's a big issue. But you have to use a tripod. If you're going to use a face-to-face, you have to use a tripod or a flash.
What was that bracket that you called, that moved back and forth?
Hello?
this
Bellows?
bellow.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Focusing rack.
Okay, the focusing rail.
I can see you need that
Okay?
for that.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that would be helpful. But here's the thing. If you don't want to go spend $500 or $300 on a really expensive macro lens that you may not use all the time, but you want to have these capabilities, buying a reversing ring for $5 or $6 or $7 and a cheap crap 50 millimeter lens for 20, a set of close-up lenses for 10, a pair of extension tubes for 30 or whatever, 35, okay? Especially autofocus capable ones. Okay, there's one more that goes with the set. I think I paid $40 for the set of 3. Okay. you can have really great macro capability for under $100. Or you can just go buy the really expensive lens, whichever. You can also just buy a pair of, or a set of the extension tubes that have the autofocus settings. Put your regular lens, whatever autofocus lens you have on there, and you're good to go there too, okay? Because let me show you what I normally do. You know, if I'm not trying to shoot really truly microscopic stuff, like really super tiny stuff, this is my setup, okay? I'll put my 70 to 300 lens on there with a couple of 25s. I've got 50 millimeters of extension here. And then when I roll the 70 millimeter out as far as I can to its closest, I almost have a 1-to-1 reproduction ratio. Because I've got 70 millimeters of extension plus a 70 millimeter lens. Okay, I'm at just close to 1-to-1 life-size reproduction. And I don't have to get that terribly close.
Another thing too is, if I remember, is
Yeah, that's pretty close.
your histogram. You really want to check what you get, because not all of the, I've gone through some of my lenses. Some of my lenses, it will freeze up,
Yeah.
and you have to guess what your settings are going to be. Because the tubes and things like that will adjust it. It will.
If
it
you
will
go
change
to
it.
autofocus, what should happen is, because the tubes do cause a darkening of your image. Okay, there's less light coming through. Okay, if you're on an autofocus setting, it should adjust automatically. If you're on a manual focus setting and you're using manual setting, you know, you're going to have to make an adjustment. But in autofocus mode, it should adjust automatically. So what I'd recommend,
I'm trying to remember how I did it, because I think
Okay.
a lot of mine was manual,
okay,
because it was so
that would do
narrow.
it. That would do
So-
it. Yeah. Especially if you're using a light meter and you're determining what your light settings are,
When you say light meter, do you mean the camera's light meter, or do you mean the
A handheld.
external?
external.
I don't have one of those.
Okay. Now,
Yeah.
when I have these tubes on and I'm focused, or I'm at 300 millimeters focal length, her bottle is in focus to me right now. And I've got the width of the bottle, which means I'm just really close to a half life size. About half life size, this far away. That's actually pretty amazing. Okay? So, this is my normal setup to shoot if I want to shoot insects or something like that. Because now I can crop though. I have a lot of room, you know, 24 megapixel, whatever I'm shooting. I can crop down quite a lot to get the image that I want out of, you know, if this is as close as I can get and that bug is really tiny, I'm still going to get a nice image. Okay? So this is how I normally do it. I have autofocus and I have vibration reduction, image stabilization. It still works. Works great. And what I want to do, I want to set my focus, because a lot of times, you know, with autofocus cameras, we have it set to continuous focus. Like we shoot birds, it's on continuous focus. You need to switch to single focus when you do this, so that the camera is not picking up the front of the flower and then the back and the front and the back, and by the time it goes off, you don't know what you got. Okay, so if you go with single focus, focus on what you want, hold that shutter button in that position, or back button, if you like back, which is what I do. Okay, hold that shutter button once you lock on what you want. If you want to reposition and frame your shot after you lock that focus, then you can do that. Okay, but you got to go single focus, not continuous focus when you're shooting macro. Does everybody understand what I mean by that? Okay. Any other questions so far? Okay. Do you need to buy a macro lens? It depends on how often you're going to do it. Lori likes to do wildlife. She likes to do birds. Does a great job of it. Guess what? You need a long lens for that. It's kind of tough to do if you don't have a long lens for it. Okay? So she spent the money, bought the lens that makes her happy, that lets her get those great photos. That's perfectly great investment because it's something she does a lot. If you're going to do macro photography a lot, go buy a macro lens. It's okay. If you don't want to buy a macro but want to do extension tubes, the only thing that makes this more convenient is I can just do this instead of having to take the lens off, put tubes on, put the lens back on. Okay? I'm okay with the inconvenience because I don't do it enough. Okay? I'm okay with taking this lens off and putting the tubes in place. I'm good. Okay? Because macro, as you know, you've seen the stuff I post, I can't get that close to a train or I'll get run over. Okay?
You can once.
What's that?
You can once.
Yeah. Here's my last post in the club. Oh wait, somebody else would have to post it for me. That's true. Because I'm a mess on the tracks. Okay. So, what's that?
You'd be a flat tire.
I would. Yeah. So, if you don't want to go spend the money on a macro lens because you don't do it that much, go buy. And the thing is, experiment and see what you do. I mean, go buy a $10 or $12 set of close-up lenses. They really are cheap, and they are very effective. Go buy some extension tubes, okay? Okay? If you really want to have fun and you have old manual focus lenses or want to get one, buy a reversing ring. Make sure that the thread of the ring matches the filter thread on that lens, so you can screw it on backwards, okay?
And if you're doing it with a reversing ring, it doesn't necessarily need to match your camera, is that right?
No. I could take my Nikon camera and I could put a Canon lens, I could put a Sears or a JCPenney or a Russian lens, it doesn't matter, because I'm doing the thread side, not the mount side.
With
It-
the reversal ring?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't, I'm a Nikon shooter. I could take a Canon manual focus, a Yashica or a Pentax or a Mamiya. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all.
Because all you're matching is the thread.
The threads is all I have to care about, matching the thread size to my reversing ring.
The mount? No.
But would that matter on any lens, any type of lens?
Nope.
As long as the thread matches.
As long as the thread, see, once I put this on my camera, I mean, this is a 52 millimeter thread. If I have a 58 millimeter thread, it's not going to go, okay? I just need to have whatever,
So do they have different reversal
Yeah.
sizes, right?
they make everything.
Okay.
You know, from, 49, because a lot of the older cameras from the 60s and early 70s were smaller. They had 49 millimeter rings, okay? Like the old Minoltas and stuff. The old Pentax, they were all 49s, okay? Nikon standardized at 52. Canon originally in the old FD, their manual focus days, they standardized at 58, if I remember correctly. Okay? Whatever lens you get, just get a reversing ring that has that thread size to match the filter size of the lens, slap it on the camera, start photographing bugs. It works beautifully. And what's really cool though too
But
is,
it only uses, it's only good for doing micro, right?
yeah, it's not good for anything else. Okay? The thing is too, is if you take your, if you have a TTL type lens or a flash that will match the through the lens metering inside the camera, even with that lens mounted backwards on a reversing ring, it will get the light exactly right every time. Okay? I'll show you. So for example, if I put this on, and I'll take my 50, and it's being stubborn, that's all right. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Okay. So now, if I open that up, okay. So if I come, actually I'm way too, okay, so I'm gonna take the bottle. I'm gonna come down here. Okay. Now I actually have this set to be a little high, but the thing is that you can see the exposure is pretty right on. Okay. And that's even with this lens mounted backwards with no electronic contacts of any kind from the lens to the camera. Because that TTL sensor inside the camera will automatically say to the flash, okay, that's enough, shut off. And the flash will shut off automatically. That happens regardless of what you have on the front. Okay? I hope this all makes sense. I've thrown a lot of crazy stuff at you. Reversing rings, face-to-face rings. Some of you have never seen a bellows before. You may never have seen a focusing rail before. You know, a flash bracket, the two-headed flash bracket. You know, there are all kinds of toys you can buy. Okay? But my advice is keep it cheap at first. Get some extension tubes, get some close-up lenses, buy a reversing ring, whatever you want to do. If you really fall in love with macro photography, then you can spend more money. But doing this allows you to explore it and have some fun without spending a fortune. Because you know it would kind of stink if you spent $500 and then decided, I just don't really like this very much. You're not going to get your investment back. Spend a little bit, have fun, try it. Okay? The other thing too is you want to use, when you're doing macro photography, you want to use as small an aperture as you can. If you can go with f11 or f16 or something like that, I would recommend it. Because keep in mind, you know, your depth of field is so shallow that even at f16, when you're 3 or 4 inches away from your subject, at f16 your depth of field still may only be 2 or 3 millimeters. And if you have that lens wide open, f2.8 or f1.8 or whatever, you may not get anything in focus. Okay? So I'd recommend try it with as tight an aperture as you can. Okay? Make sure you're not causing you're pushing your flash beyond its capability. Okay? But start with as small an aperture as you can. f11, I'd say try at least that or smaller. Work on that. You'll find that your depth of field is still incredible. I mean, you know, if you photograph a flower, even at f11, the pistils might be in focus, the rest of the flower is not. It's likely not going to be in focus. So try as small an aperture as you can. Make sure you're focusing on the actual subject and not the scene, which means, again, focus on the element of the bug or the element of the flower. If you're photographing a bee, pick the part of the bee you want to be in focus. Don't just focus on the bee. Because as critical as focus is on macro photography, you might get his rear end in focus, but his head isn't, if you're not careful there. So you've got to work on making sure what part of your subject is in focus, like flowers. You're not going to get the whole flower in focus. It just is not even possible. So get the part you want to be in focus. Does that make sense? Focus is really, really critical with really close-up macro photography. And once I said, again, what I said about autofocus, if you are going to use an autofocus lens for macro, set your focus to spot focus only. Don't do the whole, you know, matrix area average focusing. Spot only, because otherwise your camera might focus on some element that you don't want. Okay? And that element that it focuses on might just be 2 millimeters off from what you want, and it'll ruin your photo.
So can you
2
get a
millimeters.
bee that's flying around with the auto?
No.
No?
I wouldn't try macro with anything flying. Yeah, that's just going to be an exercise of frustration.
Frustration?
Okay?
You might sting me?
Yeah. See, she's a flying wildlife person. She's just trying to unthink for a minute here. It's kind of hard, okay? But the thing is that, set for spot focus, set for single focus, not continuous focus, okay? Because if you go continuous focus, as soon as you move your camera, even the slightest bit, you focus on a new part of the image that you may not want. So it's important to be single focus, spot focus, small aperture as possible. And with that, I would like to issue a challenge over the next few weeks. Find stuff to go shoot macro with. Go find little tiny objects that you can have fun shooting. If you need to spend money, spend a little bit. Like I said, I think these are $5 or $6 or $7 for a reversing ring. If you have a manual focus or a lens that has an adjustable aperture on the back that you can leave it wide open, it'll stay wide open. Okay? Close-up rings work beautifully. You can even combine a close-up ring set with, close-up lenses with extension tubes. And see what we can do there.
So where would you go to find some of this stuff? Or would you have to just order online?
A reversing ring, you might just have to get that online. You can probably get them from Amazon.
Can you get it on eBay?
Yeah, that's where I got mine. Okay, but I mean, you can find those things. You can get extension tubes most places. You can probably even find extension tubes at like Allen's Camera. You could probably find close-up lenses at Allen's Camera. But finding an older, used, they may not have a reversing ring. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't even know what it was.
They do have the focus rails.
Okay.
Or
Okay. So if I do this, I'm really close, but I'm getting that entire barcode in my image. Okay. You see that barcode there? You see how small that barcode is?
Oh,
When I focused using the extension tubes and the close-up lenses, I had that entire barcode in my image. And I'm that far away. Okay? It's not a rattlesnake. I'm okay. Okay? Now, any questions? Any questions at all?
What would you do for a rattlesnake?
Back up.
I have that on,
Get her
and I have it on continuous focus while I'm running. Click, 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 click. Bye, Felicia. I'm actually not afraid of
You
them.
ask
but,
a friend, stand here,
I
please.
keep my distance.
Don't be a headline.
Yes,
You're not
right.
getting macro with the snake, in other words.
No. It's probably not a great idea. Any questions? Any at all?
I got a comment.
Sure.
Focus stacking, you didn't really cover any of that. I don't know how many people actually do that.
I never do.
Much of it.
What's focus stacking?
That's, Google
That's a
it.
whole nother lesson.
It's a
Oh.
challenging
Yeah.
thing, but
Okay.
Okay.
Kevin
don't-
Clay does that all the, or
Yeah.
Cleo.
Yeah, I don't
All the
bother.
time.
I don't
That you
bother.
would use the rail with. I mean,
That's something you
you
can
can
use.
use it with the
Yeah.
rail. Because it just
Right.
brings you that little bit closer.
Right.
Tried
Exactly.
that, but it's, yeah, is it really something for you to do that?
well, taking pictures is the longest part, probably. Then you just throw it in a different photographs and it just stacks it.
Just as a form.
Yeah, you take several pictures of the same subject on a tripod. Same subject, just you slightly adjust your focus a little bit so more of it is in focus. I don't bother. I don't feel like it's necessary for me. A lot of people like that method, and I just don't. But not that there's a problem with it. It's just not my thing.
Just everybody likes something different.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's what's beautiful about photography. Okay,
Thank you, Rick.
as often when I come to club meetings, I come bearing gifts sometimes.
Oh, what you better just, what are you gonna do?
Okay. First of all, not macro related, I have a gimbal for people who need to shoot long distance or like on with a long telephoto lens. You mount this on your tripod and you can turn it to side or you can, set it on
So
and
will it fit on any tripod?
pretty much,
Okay, long distance?
Okay. Well, and the thing is that this is for people who need to be tripod mounted, and you need to be able to get what's called an Arca Swiss rail to go
Oh, okay.
on here, which I can give this one away, but it's got the wrong thread size. But who would like to have it? Anybody want to try that? No takers?
Nobody wants to, I will.
Okay.
Let's see.
Okay.
Well, then you can tell us how it works.
Okay.
Yeah.
With my 150 to 600.
You remember this focusing
Yeah,
rail?
there you go.
Perfect.
This focusing rail I was demoing a minute ago?
Yeah.
I never use it.
It would,
Okay?
is it camera or?
There you
go.
Okay? I never, ever use the bellows. Okay? It's okay. Maybe you two can trade. Okay?
and trade next time.
A Nikon manual focus lens. This is a 100 to 200 zoom. It's in perfect shape. It's made by Vivitar. Didn't I just give you something? Or
No, nothing.
Okay.
I didn't see
But the nice thing is that it's close focusing. At 200 millimeters, it'll focus down to 3 feet.
Oh, wow.
And then if you throw an extension tube or two on that you're,
It's not totally manual, is it?
yes. But you have a camera that would work it.
Yes.
You have a D500.
Yes.
Wait, would it fit on my focusing ring, my reverse focusing ring?
You can't easily, telephoto lenses don't work. You have to have a standard lens for focusing. Give that to Lori. Yeah.
Thank you.
And if you need to read up on how to use a manual focus, if you need to learn how to use manual focus lenses on your camera, it will work. I mean, I think you have the aperture tab, just like other newer, better Nikons do. Okay. Any questions? Anybody? I'm done.
Rick, that was.
Have fun. Get out and enjoy it. Do that macro stuff.
That was mind-blowing, some of the stuff.
I've done so, I've never heard of any blind rock.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff is like, goes way back, you know? But it's cool. It works.